Now I'm very excited to bring back a man who's been capping longer than a coon's age. You've heard him on radio shows and sports podcasts all over the nation. I'm happy to welcome back Mr. Tony George from DocSports.com. You can follow him on Twitter at TGeorgeSports. Tony, you had some vacations. I saw that. I was going to have you on earlier, but hey, man, I don't bug a man that's on vacation, but that's great. I love to hear about what you did. How's your summer going?
Summer's going good. You know, I had some health issues to open up the year and really put me behind the 8 ball for about 3 months. I'm just now kind of getting over it and had to have some major surgery and really kind of bedridden there for about 6-7 weeks and challenged my life, actually. So I was nip and tuck there for a while. And so when I finally got healed up, I decided just to go down to Gulf Shores and Pensacola area, down in Dixie, and just kill a couple of weeks and have a good time and kind of just take it easy. And baseball, you know, for many of us, not all of us, I know you're doing well. I'm not doing so well in baseball. So I stepped back a lot from volume this year and just decided to take some time off and kind of recharge the batteries and get things, get my feet back on the ground, so to speak. So, but also during all those times, gearing up and getting ready for and researching and studying what we're talking about today. And that's, well, college and pro football. And of course, NFL week 1 preseason kicks off. It's always a fun time, not necessarily a huge betting opportunity time, but it's a fun time to get TV back on the football channels and raring to go for 2023-24 season. It's going to be a really good one, I think.
I think so too. Thank God your procedures went okay. I think we talked right around that when that happened. But man, it's got to be scary, and you lose all that time for researching baseball. Makes it harder.
Yeah.
And I like what you said there about cutting volume, because I think that's one of my best ways of getting back. You know, you can never tell when you're hot, but here's the thing, you know, you're not hot on the sport. You cut the volume, you still get those days of wins. And any loss you're taking isn't extraordinary. And you're usually using your best plays when you're giving that out. And more like your 5 stars are going to be the ones more prominent, and you're not taking that one you thought that was a 2-star or 3-star that could lose. And sometimes that's just the best way to do it. And I've literally built my bankroll back by doing less volume. As a matter of fact, my baseball year has been very low volume because I had a bad last year. I was able to get some back, but I gave a ton of my basketball winnings away in April, May, June, and then I got a little back at the end. But I'm like, you know what, baseball is tough. I'm gonna do 1 to 3 plays. Once in a while you'll see a 4, but mostly it's 1.
Yeah.
And it's been great for me this year. So I love what you said there. I'm doing the same in a couple other smaller things that I need to focus on and get a little bit better at. But I love that strategy. But hey, man, you're here now. Thank goodness you're in good health. That's the most important thing, my man. And you're back for your best sport, which is football. So I'm really happy about that. And now, of course, you have been transitioned into the Big Ten a little bit with Nebraska, obviously, your alma mater, your home team, your favorite college football team. And before we get into the Big 12 or any other thoughts, here we are. You got a new coach. Me and you ragged on Scott Frost for the last 3-4 years on this show, Tony. How you feeling about the Huskers with the new coach?
Well, first of all, it pisses me off that you've got bragging rights being a Wisconsin Badger. I got to hear about that crap all the time. Every time we play them, guess what? Kiev gives me a text. Just let me know what the final score was. You know, how many touchdowns the running back had. Every time we play Wisconsin, they set a school record against us for something. So, you know, I'm kind of getting sick of that crap.
When Melvin Gordon have 426 yards in 3 quarters, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And you had a freshman that year, run a couple of years ago or last year or whatever. Oh my God. Nebraska's just been, you know, it's been a dumpster fire since they fired Frank Solich after a 10-win, 11-win season. He goes to an Orange Bowl or a Rose Bowl and plays the national title game with Eric Crouch, and they fire him. after that, no one was going to beat Miami that year. And since then, it's just been, one of the biggest collapses in the history of college football, because Nebraska, was dominant, and they're still, they've sold out every home game since 1962, which is about the only record they hold nowadays. But, Scott Frost was an absolute debacle. And the biggest problem Nebraska has is player development. They've recruited good players. They've got decent players in the transfer portal over the year, and they just continue to turn the ball over, make stupid mistakes, and bad coaching. I mean, Taylor Martinez was having a great year at Kansas State last year after he left Nebraska, just because Chris Klein's a better coach than what Scott Frost was. And of course, he got hurt, and Howard stepped in. They've got, we'll talk about them later, but they already had a deep quarterback stable. But I think the one thing about Nebraska this year, and I just did a free pick video over on, Doc Sports. We got a YouTube channel. A bunch of us put daily free plays and futures picks up there. And I just did one on Nebraska and posted it about an hour ago. And I'm going under the 6.5 wins. And I'll tell you why. First of all, Matt Rule, they paid him a crap ton of money. It was an extensive search. I think he's a good coach. He's a good college coach. He turned around Temple. And remember, he turned around Baylor when Art Briles just left that a smoldering cauldron of doom and despair.
It was one of the most amazing turnarounds I've seen in a program, actually.
But bear in mind, and I said this to all my Husker fans, and I'm an alumni, lived there 35 years. The first year at Temple and Baylor combined for Matt Rule, the win-loss record was 3-23 in year one. It takes a long time to build a program, especially in the Big Ten. It's not like we're in the Mountain West or the AAC or, the Sun Belt. This is a Big Ten. Now you've got USC and UCLA in there. You got more coming in. You've got, powerhouse programs like, Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan, and, Michigan State's coming on. Iowa's always tough. Illinois is on the rise there, as well with Bielema, your ex Wisconsin coach, who did a hell of a job with Illinois last year. I mean, like him or don't like him, he did a hell of a job. But Nebraska's, if they were to somehow get to 6 wins and a bowl game, somehow, if they were to do that, that would be the biggest step forward in that program in the last 20 years. Yeah. Literally in the last 20 years. So I think that people need to manage expectations. They're going to open up against Minnesota on the road. And then the following game, they got to go to Colorado and do the Neon Dion primetime game there, where they're laying, I thought futures line on that at -9. I don't know anybody in my business, including you, that the second game of the season under a new head coach, where they don't have on the first team and the second team preseason all-conference team, Nebraska doesn't have one single player on that roster in the first or second all-conference teams. They are talent depleted, and you're gonna lay 9 with them on the road in Boulder. I mean, I think you need to they got Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech to open up their only 2 games at home that aren't conference games. They might be able to get through those. Maybe they split 1-1 or go 0-2 out of the gate, but I just don't see them. We got a new quarterback, Jeff Sims, out of Georgia Tech. We've got an entirely decimated defensive line. We've got an offensive line returning that was ranked 108th last year in college football out of 130-some programs. There's just a lot of things. One thing I will tell you, they'll be more physical, and they're going to be a lot more disciplined than they were under Scott Frost, and that will get them over the hump, in some games. In terms of competing, Kiev, and just not laying down, being a doormat and a whipping boy.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm a little more lukewarm on Nebraska than you are. I just think that the Big Ten, West is wide open in a way. There's a lot of hype for Wisconsin, and this Phil Longo offense is a massive change from what Wisconsin has ever done. I mean, their spring game, they look terrible. I mean, they could be the biggest disappointment and then leave the door open for someone else. I don't like Purdue in their transition.
No,
I think Minnesota's always there, but they lost a ton of talent, including a quarterback. And then Illinois lost everybody to the NFL. I expect some regression there. They had a great fumble luck over there. You got Iowa, and they got Cade McNamara. So I guess they're kind of the favorites with Wisconsin. But it wouldn't shock me to see something out of Matt Rule. And I will say that Sims is a better quarterback than what they've had. And he was the only reason Georgia Tech got to 5 wins last year was Sims. So you got something working for you there. I think there's a little bit of hope for the Big Ten. But, switching to what's going on in this landscape, and we don't need to spend too much time on this, but man, we just saw over the last week, the Pac-12 get picked off more than Jameis Winston in 2019. I've never seen a conference just absolutely combust in this way in my entire life. Now, I mean, there's no Pac-4. This has got to end after this year. What are your thoughts about the new landscape we're about to see, and what the hell happened?
Well, I did a podcast yesterday with a guy. We were talking about kind of the implosion of the Pac-12 and just basically the landscape of college football in general. And I don't know how it's going to shake out. I think it's all about money and greed. I don't think that's good for college football. I don't know about TV ratings. I don't know about an expanded playoff system with these big super conferences now. These players are getting nil contracts. I mean, this is just all it's become is just a paid farm club for the NFL anymore. And it's kind of taken the innocence out of college athletics in a certain degree, stuff that you and I grew up with. The guy I was talking to yesterday was like 28 years old. You and I got gray hair. We've been around a while. We're used to traditions, rivalries, Oregon State, one of the best rivalries in the country. I mean, that's the Civil War. That's it. I mean, I think USC and UCLA will still get it on, but like the Nebraska, Oklahoma games of the past, the day after Thanksgiving, they're gone. Now it's Iowa. I can't get behind that. Bedlam, that's gone. Oklahoma to the SEC, that sort of thing. So Oklahoma State, that we're not going to see that. Even in basketball, Kansas and Missouri was always a humongous rivalry. In the Big 12 back in the day, just all these things. And I don't know how it's going to shake out. And I don't know, how they're going to, apparently the TV revenue is enough to give all these conferences, all kinds of this money that people will leave for it. But, I don't know how it's going to shake out. I understand why a lot of these teams out west left. I mean, they don't get a lot of TV exposure on the East Coast or even in the Midwest. No one watches the Mountain West and the Pac-12 a whole lot. Not like the ACC, SEC, and Big 10 and Big 12. They don't have that kind of draw. So it was for me and you as handicappers being able to do the WAC or the Mountain West or the Pac-12 without that as much focus on it as, Florida playing Florida or Florida playing Georgia or any of these others, you could really hone in and maybe find some edges on those point spreads with those less than focused games. So yeah, Oregon was good and Washington was kind of good there for a while. But at the end of the day, I watch those more than most people because that's what we do for a living. Through sheer attrition, you had to do it. So I'm going to miss finding those advantages. But I think the Conference of Champions, as Bill Walton likes to term it, is long gone and over. And who's ever left standing is going to be in the Mountain West or somewhere else, because geographically it doesn't even make sense. These kids are flying from LA to New Jersey to go play Rutgers or Maryland, or these are still 18, 19-year-old kids as student athletes. And I'm not so sure they're trying to professionalize the game and get professional style money involved with all these athletic departments, how that's going to be good for the game down the road. So we'll just see.
I don't understand why the Pac-12 and the Big 12 kind of didn't see a little bit more of this coming. Now the Big 12 didn't get picked off more. I mean, who would be any of interest to the Big 10 besides Oklahoma and Texas?
That makes more sense than the SEC.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is like, why? If I could redo it, I think the smarter thing that Pac-12 could have done before they just lost Oregon and Washington is some sort of merger with the Big 12, Pac-12 merger. I mean, you're going to have the most teams, but so what? It looks like they don't care about number of teams. Well, just having that many teams makes you look like a powerhouse.
Yeah,
and you get to keep your Oregons, you got to keep your Washingtons that way. Your Arizona States, which is a massive market, obviously.
Yeah,
the size of the Phoenix is roughly 4th or 5th biggest in the country.
Yeah,
you're going to keep massive markets that way. I think that would have been smarter for them, but now there is no more Pac-12 and the Big 12. I'm sorry, it's just going to be looked at as an under. Appreciated conference. It's not so much like a Conference USA, but they're going to say, oh, they're not in the Big 10. Oh, they're not in the SEC. Wait till you hear all that for the next 5 years. It's like, oh, why does the Big 12 have 2 teams in the 12-team playoff, right? You might hear some of that, and it's just because of the media and the pundits that get paid to smear people. But the truth is I'm an old school guy, and I think that I like the way it was. I just think the only problem was only having 4 teams in the playoffs anyway. And now it's just all about money, and these schools kind of separate. It shows you how weak the NCAA really was. All this stuff was run by conferences and their own rules in the first place, Tony. But
they're trying to compete with the SEC. I mean, they dominate college football, and they want to get a conference where they can contend. I think they've got one this year in the Big 10 in terms of top heavy. You're talking about the Final Four. You want to comment on the Final Four. I think you're going to end up seeing Michigan and Ohio State both in it. And I'm probably going to see Georgia, and you might see either Clemson or Florida State. I'd lean Florida State there. I think they're going to have a phenomenal year this year. I think they're going to come out of the gate, and I think they can get Clemson. I'm not sold on Clemson this year. And by the way, I didn't mention a Big 12 team. I don't see they're gonna the Big 12's top heavy with 3 teams, the Big 10's top heavy with maybe 3, 2 for sure. Like you said, half of the Big 10's wide open. It's anybody's ball game.
I got 7 teams can I think make it: Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, LSU, Florida State, Clemson. And I guess throw in Texas, maybe 8 teams, but Texas's talent just has to put them there. And if they go to Alabama and win that game, they can afford a loss and get into the champ and get into the 4 playoffs, because this is the last year of 4 playoffs. I guess if I was going to pick, I would go Michigan, Ohio State, LSU. And if you can throw in any of them, I'll go Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, LSU, and Clemson. I'll just say the SEC beats each other up because they lost their quarterbacks. You can come up with anything, but I still have Georgia my number 1 power ranked team, and I really have Alabama at number 2 until they prove me differently. I have to go by past success. So there you go. I mean, we're just kind of shooting darts at this point, but what we do want to talk about here and focus on is the Big 12, and we'll start with Texas. They're my highest power rated team. I have them number 6 in the nation right now, personally. They return a decent amount of production. They were 1.44 net yards per play. Is this the team to beat to win the Big 12, Tony?
Well, I'm looking at one of these preseason publications, and I found one I really like that does a really good job of ranking teams, like a Phil Steele. By the way, speaking of Phil Steele, I'm going to throw this out there real quick. Phil Steele predicted and said not only does Wisconsin win that division, the Big 10, he thinks they win the Big 10. Which I kind of lost some footing on Phil Steele after that, but I'm using this Pick 6 previews, which is a really good preview. And if you look at the unit rankings in the Big 12 in terms of the quarterback unit, the running back unit, and I agree with all these. Number 2 for the quarterback unit with Ewers in there, and I'll tell you why that is in a second. Running back number 5, they lost their stud, but every other unit, wide receiver 1, tight end 1, offensive line 1, defensive line 1, defensive backs 1. These are rankings per unit, and number 2 in linebacker. And the only reason that Quentin Ewers isn't the number 1 quarterback in the Big 12 is because that Jalen Daniels for Kansas is going to be the best quarterback in the Big 12 this year. Mark my words on that. And he ranks in the top 5 in almost every category that counts nationally coming into this year, and they're going to have a good team. Leopold's going to have another competitive team there, but
I hope so, man.
I don't see the Brent Venables experiment at Oklahoma last year failed miserably. You saw the difference in talent that Texas had against Oklahoma in that Red River War game last year. So that being said, I don't think anybody in this – I think you look Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, TCU, and Texas Tech are the teams that are going to matter in this conference. The rest of them's all a toss-up. And as a matter of fact, as far as I'm concerned, Kiev, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas State's, neither one of those teams is a touchdown favorite over the other. I mean, Texas is not going to be a favorite a touchdown over Oklahoma or Kansas State. And I tell you what, you better keep your eye on Kansas State because this Chris Klein is no freaking joke. This guy can coach football. They got a crap ton of players coming back, including their quarterback. They did very well in recruiting. They did very well in the transfer portal. He's the second coming of Bill Snyder. I mean, he really is.
I think so too. And here's the thing. Obviously, we'll get to Kansas State. We're on Texas, but Texas, I feel like kind of what you said about there, a bunch of teams, a handful of teams. I think there's a lot of teams that can win the Big 12. It's like, I don't think there's a lot of teams that can win the SEC. I think it's Alabama, Georgia, and LSU personally. I don't think there's a lot of teams that win the ACC. It's Florida State and Clemson. I don't think there's a lot of teams that win the Big 10. Sorry, Phil Steele. Quit trying to get me excited, but no, it's Michigan and Ohio State. You know,
I probably thought you probably made a banner out of that statement. You knew about it.
Oh, I wish I was more of a homer, man. I'm not. I'm a pessimist Badger fan. Glass is half empty, my friend. Glass is half empty. I've seen enough. But what I will say is that the Big 12 is up for grabs, and I've heard this crap about Texas for years now, and they still don't put it together. Quinn Ewers is backed up by a couple quarterbacks. Archie Manning is one of them, and he's too young right now. Their other guy, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. He has a shot, but in my opinion, you know, Texas has the talent, but they never can completely put it together. And I've seen too many chokes from Ewers. So wink, wink, wink. I'm going to have a couple future bets that I think could at least play Texas in the championship game, Tony, that you can hedge out of. Okay. So you kind of hinted on one of them already, but my number is 9 for wins. 9.5 is the win total for Texas. So even though they're my highest power rated team, I have to power rate them based upon their recruiting talent, ranking 6.33 in their last 3 years. The good returning production, 19th in the nation, but it's still Texas. So let's move on to Oklahoma because you just mentioned.
I just wanted to mention one thing too. I think you failed to mention Texas's biggest liability, Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah,
he can't win the big one. He's like Mac Brown. Can't win. The way like Mac Brown, I'll give him one thing. He won a national title, but he won it with Vince Young. And if Vince Young was playing for Tulane that year, they would have won the national title. He was one of the best college football quarterbacks since Tommy Frazier. I mean, the guy was just unbelievable. Couldn't stop him. One of the best, probably the best national title game I ever saw, that USC Texas game. But Sarkisian last year also, you know, Ewers got hurt in that Alabama game. He came back later in the season. But one thing about it that gives me pause in terms of I want to be higher on Texas. He really limited his playbook last year with a young quarterback, and they had the running game where they could just do a lot of play action passing and short dinks and dunks. I think he opens up the playbook a little bit more this year in terms of the vertical game, and it's going to be interesting to see, because if that pans out and if we think everybody as good as he thinks he is, they could potentially be a high octane attack that's very difficult to stop.
Well, they would give up. He didn't know how to handle fourth quarters, and they would get just beat down on those fourth quarters at some point in the big games. He might be learning a little bit, but you're right. He is their best offensive guy and their best liability when it comes to getting those W's needed to get into the championship. So that's why I always hesitate when I say Texas. But, look at what you said about Brent Venables in Oklahoma. I was not impressed last year. I have Oklahoma, my 17th best team, to be honest. I'm not that high on them.
Yeah,
I'm covering them because they're Oklahoma, but literally their returning production ranked 77th. Their transfer portal did well at 8th. Their net yards per play only 0.49 in the positive with Oklahoma. Their strength of schedule is 41st this year. Their win total is 9.5. I have them at 8.75 wins if they have a good season.
Right.
I mean, I see losses here potentially, obviously, versus Texas and the Red River rivalry again. At Kansas is going to be tricky. At Oklahoma State would like to give them a farewell, goodbye type game on November 4th this year.
Yeah, I don't think they can.
Well, they'll try.
They'll try, but they lost more than anybody in the conference. They lost a quarterback that's in a battle down at Ole Miss right now. But I'm telling you right now, well, you know who Matt Humans is out here at VEASAN in Las Vegas. You do some stuff with VEASAN. This is one of his biggest picks, is under the win total with Okie State. And if you do some matrix and take a look at them, they lost more in the transfer portal last year than almost any other team in the country. And so Gundy's going to have his hands full right now, getting that program back. Now, maybe by November, when is that? Let me look at that game. That's November 4th. Maybe by November they got their act together and give Oklahoma, a ball game. But because that is in Stillwater, which is worth 3 or 4 points. But right now I'm not real high on Oklahoma State. But then again, I'm not overly high on Oklahoma. I think Kansas State might have a better team. And then your West Virginia is the worst team in the league. They play them the following week and then at BYU, and then they end with the loss probably to TCU. So I don't know about Oklahoma this year. You're thinking what, 8 wins?
Oklahoma 8 or 9 wins. I do like the fact that they don't get Kansas State. So that helps them on their schedule. They get the newcomers at BYU and they get UCF. Yeah. So that's helpful. Yeah. What sucks is their schedule's easy. They got 3 easy non-conference: Arkansas State, SMU, and Tulsa.
Yeah.
So they have a path, but I just don't trust the offense here. I know Venables is a defensive guy, but in my opinion, I didn't see anything out of Dylan Gabriel last year that made me think he's a big-time quarterback. Yeah. He came from UCF, and I just didn't think that, I thought UCF took a little bit of a step back when their guy went out, obviously on that gruesome injury. I'm blanking on his name, but
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name either.
Yeah, but he was like on the way to the NFL before that thing happened. So I was very upset about that. I'll think of his name in a minute, but I'm just not that impressed with their offense, and they also lost a lot of production. So, and you say Oklahoma State lost a lot of production. So here's the thing. I am against everybody on this because I think Oklahoma State, even though they lost 18 guys for transfers out, including their quarterback, Spencer Sanders, they got 14 guys in. They're not ranked high in the net rankings for that. But at the same time, this is kind of when Gundy shows his best work, is when they're undervalued. And this schedule for Oklahoma State is extremely easy. Oklahoma State doesn't face Texas this year. They don't face they get Kansas State at home and Kansas at home, which are a very much improved Kansas. They get Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF and BYU. They get all 4 newcomers, meaning they're avoiding some teams. They're at Iowa State, but Campbell doesn't really scare me anymore. West Virginia, that's a possible win right there. Cincinnati lost to everybody this year. Their schedule is just so easy, you know,
and
that's the way they could sneak in.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I could see that. I could see the argument, but until I see, you lose a quarterback like that, and you lose a bunch of your one thing Mike Gundy's done over the past 3 or 4 years, especially, is he's improved his defense. He had the Mac Brown school of thought. We'll just outscore everybody. But that plays a role of attrition on your team, on your offensive players, when you lack a lot of depth, is we'll just beat people 41-38 every game. So, he finally got his defense, going. And they lost a lot on their defensive side of the ball last year as well. And then losing a 4-year starter at quarterback that is an absolute stud, I tell you what, that's going to leave a mark. And
That was weird. Spencer Sanders leaving was really weird, because he's taking a backup role now, right? I mean, right. I don't understand that thought. Like, what do you think you're going to all of a sudden, be the guy, coming in? I just feel really weird why he left, and it shows that there is some definitely friction between Gundy and him, because he went to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss has Jackson Dart there. So it's like, what are you going to do? Are you sure you're going to beat Jackson Dart out? I don't think so. So I thought that was just very strange. Now Bowman comes in, Alan Bowman, which did good 1 year for Texas Tech. And then he did terrible at Michigan, but he wasn't, but then again, he wasn't, I guess that's okay if it's Michigan, but maybe if he gets resurrected here or something, then this team could be a little bit deadly. I don't know. But but what I'm saying too, they avoid TCU, who won it last year. They avoid Texas. Yeah. So they avoid the two best teams, I think, with Kansas State, of course, there. They at least get them at home. Avoid the top 2 teams, and Kansas State's at home. I kind of like that. And Oklahoma's at home. So schedule-wise, if they can just be in the mix, they can be 9 or 10 wins. So I'm going to disagree with Matt Humans. I hate disagreeing with them, but in this case, I think they go over. I think they're contending for the title.
I'm going to tell Matt that I'm golfing with him in the VEASAN tournament on Sunday out at Prim Valley. So I'm going to be sure and tell him that you want to side bet on that, since you're so confident in Okie State, because here's what you're betting. Remember, their defensive coordinator retired last year, and he needed to. Their rushing defense ranked 101st, yards per carry, 107th, explosive rush, which is, plays of over 8 yards, they ranked 117th. Their passing defense is ranked 106th, and they brought in a guy from Division II school, kind of an off-the-radar assistant. So it's going to be interesting to see Mike Urich from Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, see what he can do there. But I'm telling you right now, this is a quarterback-driven league, and I don't think they've got one. Kevin, I think it's going to make a difference. I mean, in terms of those tight games, Kansas State, if they don't have it together, they can lose both of those.
Well, Spencer Sanders wasn't exactly good last year either. So, I mean, they're in like the 90s in pass EPA. And now I know they've been shedding a lot of guys, but I mean, a guy that's like ranked in the 90s, that's worse than Division II, or not Division II, but like Group of 5 schools. I mean, how bad of a downgrade is this? I don't know if it was Spencer Sanders, but here's the thing. I'm just going to say, with this transfer stuff going on, they still brought 14 guys going in. I think the unknown is a lot better, and that's why, or a lot bigger. And this is also why I like to spread it out a little bit. I'm going to take Oklahoma State as a shot to win the Big 12 at 40-1. And you tell Matt Humans, he can give me a call. You can give me a call.
I'm going to tell him during the show, after you already said Oklahoma State was going to really give everybody a ball game, that then you went out after, and I'm going to tell him you weren't even drinking cocktails yet, and you said I'm going to throw a flyer on him at 40-1.
Hell yeah!
They might not let you in the circa again, dude.
Okay, well, you know what? I'll be fine, because I'll be there in a couple of weeks, and I'm telling myself as soon as I'm there. I'm sure he'll stop by.
I'll be there with you, my man.
All right, buddy. No, it's fun to have some disagreement, and I will disagree with that one. Yep. And we'll move on to TCU, because TCU was the champion team last year. Geez, Max Duggan, holy cow, did he take that quarterback position away from Chandler Morris so quickly in that Colorado game? That was the worst half of football I've seen on TCU. And then the whole rest of the year was just like, are you serious, right? Yeah. But now you have Chandler Morris coming back, and he's penciled in as the starter. Sonny Dykes did amazing things, transferring from SMU and working his magic here. Now the Horned Frogs, though, I hate to say it, they lost a ton of talent. What are your thoughts on the Horned Frogs this year? I believe their win total is probably around 7.5 now.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put Texas Tech in 4th and TCU in 5th in my rankings in this conference. And I think Texas Tech is a solid over 7.5 win total. I really like Texas Tech. That's one of my top picks out of this conference over the win total. And just for the reason that you stated, I think Sonny Dykes is a good coach. Mm-hmm. I thought he coached a team of overachievers last year that won some miracle ball games. Baylor, one of them, the Michigan game. And the quarterback they had was phenomenal. One of the best. He was a poor man's Brett Favre. Didn't look real pretty doing it, but boy, he gutted it out. He willed that team to a win. He reminded me of Favre for all those years up in Green Bay. And what a phenomenal football player. Just a phenomenal. In my opinion, I know that if it was any other year than last year, the kid probably would have won the Heisman. I mean, he was that good of a football player. So I guess my only comment on TCU is we're going to find out how good of a coach Sonny Dykes is this year. Because losing that kind of talent, not only quarterback, but at other key spots, in a top-heavy conference where they're in the conversation, we're going to find out how good they are. But their defense is going to have to get a little better this year because until we can see their offense do what they did last year, you're going to have to play a little better defense. But I think Sonny Dykes is a better than average coach. We're going to find out just how good he is this year, buddy.
Well, I mean, what Max Duggan did when those 3rd and longs and he ran for 10 to 15 yards, getting almost every single one of them throughout the year, being dead to rights in the 4th quarter and them coming back and winning. That's not sustainable. And the good news is they get a couple Bama transfers, Trey Sanders at running back, JoJo Earl at wide receiver. Yeah. Seems like a lot of Bama transfers this year. Bama's really recycled some guys. The defense remains mainly intact, but they still weren't the reason that this team did well. You know, it wasn't their defense, it was their offense. And so I don't know what to think about that, but I had to give them a downgrade. And unfortunately for the big talent, 2 guys at receiver, they lost both to the Chargers, actually. This was one of my biggest downgrades. 8 points in the power ratings, being this Max Duggan and their skill positions leaving. So they only rank 118th in returning production. I have them at 7 wins. So I definitely do not have them as one of the scary teams, but it is Sonny Dykes. You can probably bet some overs with them after the market adjusts to the clock not stopping on first down. But this is going to be interesting too. I love what you said about Jalen Daniels for Kansas, because I'm partnering my 40-1. And these are just like tiny half-unit plays, Tony. But I think Kansas and Kansas State maybe could be at the championship game versus the Texas, right? Now, Kansas was my darling last year, and they went over my win total early by the 3rd game or something. They went over my win total. It was wonderful. It was like, imagine hitting your over 2.5 by the 3rd game. That just tells you the market was completely wrong on them. But Jalen Daniels got hurt mid-season, and this team had to outscore a lot of people. But I really believe that Kansas, with Jalen Daniels and the fact that the Big 12 is just all over the place, maybe they're one of the ones that make an argument. Now, they're not my best team by any means. I think I have them ranked around 36th in the nation, but what do I know, right? They ranked 2nd in returning production. They got rid of their defensive line, but they return everybody else. That's either a good thing or a very bad thing because they were bad on defense. But now this is the coach that I'm betting on, Lance Leopold, who I saw win 3 championships in a row at UW Whitewater out in Wisconsin, about an hour from Madison. I seen him win at Buffalo, taking them to the championship game when he resurrected that program. And, Kansas, believe it or not, was 0.82 net positive yards per play last year, returning all that production. If they can just fix their defense a little bit and still be a little bit of a highlight reel, I think they have a real chance. What I don't like about them is that they do have to play at Texas. They do have to play Oklahoma this year. They play Texas Tech at home and Kansas State at home, and they ended at Cincinnati, but I'm not afraid about Cincinnati this year. But this is another team that I think if the Big 12's a mess, you get them at 35 or 40-1. That's who you partner your Oklahoma State with. And throwing a little bit on Kansas State as well might not be a bad. But here's the thing. I'm just taking a spray shotgun approach at this because I see many scenarios in the Big 12. I wouldn't do this in the Big 10. I wouldn't do this in the SEC. I wouldn't do this in the ACC, maybe a little bit in the Pac-12. But Kansas right now, I like their quarterback, and I love their coach, and that's what I love betting on, quarterbacks and coaches.
I think, and I'm going to reserve. This is not a team I'm willing to bet season win totals on or right now. This is an in-season play in terms of conference, but I want to see them September 8th against Illinois. They have Illinois at home. Now, Illinois lost everybody. They lost. I think Illinois had 5 or 6 players that went in the draft. Now they're opening up with Missouri State, which is just it's a team down in Springfield, Missouri. It's a soap scrimmage, But then they got Illinois, and then they're at Nevada. Then they got BYU at home. If they can get through that 4-0, then we're talking. Because bear in mind, defensively, they weren't all that good last year. I remember that bowl game. Who'd they play? Arkansas? It was like 55-53 or some crazy game they played. But they're returning 10 starters on a very productive offense with the best quarterback in the Big 12, and that considers some merit.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Daniels was fantastic. He's got to stay healthy, but the coach, the returning production, the yards per play, we saw them suck on defense. Can they fix that? I don't know, but it was his first year too for Lance Leopold. Look at how we saw Chris Kleiman advance as the Kansas State beats TCU in the championship game. And to be honest with you, TCU was or Kansas State was the tougher team. They would hit you in the mouth more. And so let's move on to Kansas State because I have no problem sprinkling a little on them at 5-1. Wow. Now, here's the problem with Kansas State. You can't hedge out of that really if they're playing Texas in the finals, but you can at least have something going into that game. I think that's most probable that it's going to be Kansas State this year in the Big 12 championship game. The recruiting's never been all that great, but Kleiman came from the Dakotas, man, and from the FCS there. He makes the best of what he gets. And so at this point, if you're not getting 5-star, 4-star guys, it's all a crapshoot in my opinion anyway. A 2-star guy might as well be better than a 3-star guy in many of these situations. Their returning production ranks 76th in the nation. They did lose some guys to the pros, but they were a solid 0.58 net yards per play, and they returned their quarterback, Will Howard. Returning Will Howard, I think, is the best thing that happened to him. So you got a great coach and you got a good quarterback again. So that's just what I'm betting on. Non-flashy at all. They weren't a flashy team. They did the small things right, ranking 9th in turnover margin while playing very good defense. They do at least get 8 starters back on offense. The defense is a little bit more of a rebuild, only returning 5 starters, but it's just how Chris Kleiman builds his defense and finds these guys that are just workhorses and massively undervalued to the recruiting rankings. So I like their schedule. It's not terrible. They avoid Oklahoma this year. They're at Texas, so that's a little tricky. But here's the thing. Your thought process anyway is they're playing Texas in the final game. They get Baylor at home. They get Iowa State at home. If Kansas is fizzled out by November 18th, they have to go to Kansas, but they get TCU at home too. So this is another team that could be very dangerous. So I like Kansas State again. It wouldn't shock me. You get them at 5.5, 6-1 right now to win. Like I said, the Big 12 is a crapshoot. I don't mind betting on the coach and the quarterback.
In my power ratings between Texas. Because I think there's a liability head coach there, and I figure that in my power ratings. Oklahoma and Kansas State, on a neutral field. I have both Texas and Oklahoma favored in a neutral site situation over Kansas State by no more than 5.5 points. And I think coaching has a lot to do with that. I think the best head coach out of those three is Kleinman, between Venables, because he's still new as a head coach. He's a great coordinator, but he's gonna have to cut his teeth. Sarkisian gets games like that and loses them. I like their schedule. I think they enter the bye week unbeaten. They open up Southeast Missouri State, which is an FCS school. They're playing Troy. They play at Missouri, an old rival, kind of an old Big 12 rival there, which will be an interesting game. Then they open up a conference action against Central Florida. A lot of people have them kind of rated higher, like middle of the pack in the conference. And they have a bye. Then they play at Oklahoma State, at Texas Tech. They got TCU at home, which helps. Houston at home, which they're going to kill them. At Texas, could be a loss. Baylor down again this year. Kansas, and they're going to beat Iowa State at home. That Kansas game will loom large, as you said. They may have fizzled out. They fizzled out last year after starting out 5-0.
Yeah, I mean, this is they were the most surprising team last year for sure. And I'm just wondering if they can keep it up, and I think they can. But for the sake of time, let's do Texas Tech real quick, and then we can kind of just say pick one of the other ones. In West Virginia, I don't know. Texas Tech. This was the other team that I kind of would have bet if I didn't bet Kansas State. They're more like 12-1 to win. I like their coach there and what they're doing.
McGuire's good.
McGuire came from a high school, but he knew all like the recruits, and he's just well in tune to Texas high school football, which is getting them recruits over at Texas Tech. And that was a little shocking to me, seeing them do so good last year. Tyler Shuck is back, and they returned some great guys too. They ranked 64th in returning production. Transfer portal rankings is 59th. Now they're net negative yards per play, but man, getting 8 wins was pretty huge last year, and they won some big games. Nice 4 wins in a row after November 5th. They won 4 in a row after November 5th, right?
Yeah, and they didn't fizzle out like they usually do in the end. And they had a huge win. Everybody forgets this. They had a huge win against Ole Miss in the bowl game.
Right, huge win against Ole Miss, and everyone was betting Ole Miss. And they beat Oklahoma. They beat Oklahoma in overtime on November 26th.
Yeah, 51-48.
These last 4 wins weren't cakewalks. Kansas, at Iowa State, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss. So, this is one of them that if I could take anything, I can't bet on everybody. It's just negative. I might even be on some negative EV right now. I just look at the conference as more opportunity. 240 to 1s and a 5.5 to 1 is what I'm on, right? So, Texas Tech is at 12 to 1. I could certainly see them make an argument here for the championship. And I will say that this team avoids Oklahoma, and they get TCU at home, and they get Kansas State at home. So it's almost like one of those, you avoid one of the old powerhouses in Oklahoma, even though we just hated on them. They get Kansas State at home, which was the champ. They get TCU at home. And then their only issue is at Texas, where they could already be in the championship game by then anyway. So if I had to take anything back, I would go with them. They do have an interesting non-conference game against Oregon on September 9th.
Yeah, I think they get to that Kansas State game at home 5-1. I think they might lose. They're probably going to Wyoming winner, Oregon be a good ball game. I'd be curious to see that spread. Tarleton State, well, that's a soap scrimmage. West Virginia is the worst team and we'll talk about we're going to cherry pick and get out of here, but I'll tell you why you need to fade West Virginia almost every game. But, and then Houston, they'll beat them. At Baylor, they'll beat them. They get to Kansas State. If they had a miracle against Oregon, they could get the Kansas State game unbeaten. It'll be 5-1. And even if you lose to that one at BYU, then you got to bye. So you got a week off to prepare to play TCU at home, which is huge, especially when you're talking November, late October. To have a bye week that gives you're going to get banged up by late October. And then you're at Kansas. Kansas, again, may not be – their depth for them late in the season showed last year. It'll show this year. UFC's a win, and you probably close out with a loss at Texas, but who knows?
Oh, right. And
that game against Texas might be to play in the title game.
I would not hate a bet on this team to go over their win total as well. Their win total is at 7.5.
Yeah, minus 105. It was at plus 120. I mean, that thing turned around quickly. It opened at plus 120 at over 7.5. Now it's minus 105. What's that tell you? That tells you a sharp early money was coming in on Texas Tech. They thought that number was weak.
Yeah, Zach Kitley's a great coordinator there too. Remember, he was on Sam Houston for a while when they were winning out there.
Right.
And he comes over here. Man, I'm gonna seriously consider taking this over, and at 7.5, I'm gonna seriously consider that. I only put a 8 as my win total, but I might be a little light on this. I'm gonna have to run that. Look at my spreadsheet again on that. So let's pick another team. West Virginia, like you said, I think you said enough about West Virginia.
Yeah, they're terrible. I mean,
they're terrible. Yeah,
their unit rankings are either last or dead last in every single category, including the worst quarterback unit. They got a good running back, but other than that, defensively, they're in big trouble. They're going to give up yards and chunks and all kinds of scoring. I would fade them. If you can get even a mediocre team to an above average team laying less than 10 against them, and they're on the road, for instance, just look at the schedule, folks. Fade them, because they're going to have a lot of problems at West Virginia this year.
Another early fade is a team I'll pick is that Cincinnati here. Now they're going to take a massive step back, and I know they've recruited pretty well compared to like the Power 5. Like they've been recruiting like the Power 5 for the last few years, but 124th is what they rank into returning production. Their transfer portal rankings 39th. They're a nice positive 1.16 yards per play, but they're in the Big 12 now. They're moving from the AAC that was a little weaker last year. There's a lot of teams that really took a step down last year. Their win total's 5.5 for a reason. Scott Satterfield's coming in from Louisville. What a weird transition that was. He loses his job to Jeff Brom, and then he goes into Cincinnati. That's a tough hire after losing their coach to Wisconsin, right? One starter on offense is literally what they return. They get ASU transfer Emory Jones. I'm not so high on Emory Jones. I thought he did okay last year, but this defense was decimated by graduation. They lost everybody. This is a new team starting out, and now they're coming into the Big 12. This is a completely different team than what you saw the last 3 or 4 years. I'm going to be fading them most likely. I think the market might not have adjusted. I've moved them about 6 points down in my power ranks from last year, Tony. So I'm not sure about their win total, being that they do have some easier games. So that does worry me about the 5.5. I think they win against Eastern Kentucky, Miami, Ohio, at Pittsburgh, probably not. But they do have some easy games. I would still lean to the under 5.5 for sure. Just curious if they can sneak one against UCF, against Baylor at home or something in Iowa State. Who I'm
maybe at Houston. Maybe at Houston. They're not. Oklahoma State's better than they are. I mean, Iowa State, they get them at home. I'll tell you one thing. Iowa State's going to be middle of the pack this year, but folks, never underestimate how difficult it is to go into Jack Trice Stadium in Ames, Iowa and win. I'm speaking from experience. I lived in Lincoln, Nebraska. We were in a Big 8 and a Big 12 for 35 years. That is one of the biggest snake pits to play in. The Hilton Coliseum for the basketball team is no joke either. Iowa State has some of the best fans in the country. Radical, loud, riot level, courteous, but boy, do they back their team. And I'll tell you what, so they're lucky they're getting Iowa State at home, but this is a complete rebuild. I mean, this is a complete rebuild and complete new system, new coaching system, a complete new everything. And you've bumped up from the AAC to the Big 12. I mean, that's on top of all that other stuff, Kiev, it's the Big 12 conference.
Yeah, it's too much going against them.
Yeah.
for Satterfield to even handle this year. It's a honeymoon year for him, so his job is okay if he wins a couple games, but it's I just don't see him winning a lot of games. Maybe that 5.5 is still live under. I'll take another look at that one, but that was the one I picked. You want to pick any of the other teams to cover before we go?
No, I think the best pick I got is Texas Tech over 7.5 wins, and Kansas State over 7.5 at -130. And I'll tell you, I'd probably put out a flyer on K-State to win the conference.
All right, K-State to win the conference, and that's the 5.5 one. I have the flyer on K-State to win the conference as well. I have the over Oklahoma State 6.5 flyer on them at 40-1 to win the conference, and Kansas at 35 or 40-1. I've seen them both right now to win. Those are my plays, and I'm probably going to take Texas Tech's over. So just have that in the back of your mind. It's almost like a fail safe, but they all have to be Texas, and that's
you need to have that Texas Tech over as my best bet to cover that Oklahoma State loss.
I just think this Big 12 is wide open. But I actually think UCF is a little tricky too, because Gus Malzahn has recruited really well, and they return a ton. Plum Lee's a good quarterback. You know, I think that UCF now is just that. I think they're in better shape than BYU and Cincinnati and Houston right now.
Big time.
Coming
they are
to the Big 12.
They are.
I think
they could finish 7th in the conference.
Yeah. I think they'll sneak a win against somebody they shouldn't, at least.
Right.
Maybe it's Oklahoma. Maybe it's someone like that to look at their schedule. But maybe it's at Kansas too. At Kansas State might overlook them. If
you overlook them, But again, I'm always wary of teams that come out of a mid-major style conference and go into a big conference their first year, because it is a different ball game. But Central Florida has also proven in some games against some big competition in bowl games they can play ball. So let's see what happens. But I think they're middle of the pack team. I think they'll do better than any of the other newcomers.
All right. No, I agree with you too. And I think they're better than West Virginia as well. We'll see about Iowa State. What I do like about Iowa State, they do return a ton of production. So, they could be that sneaky team. But, kind of what we said in the beginning of this whole podcast, this Big 12, you can make arguments left and right for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Baylor's supposed to be back with their coach, Dave Aranda, who used to be our coordinator and the Badgers, LSU's coordinator when they won the championship.
Yeah.
There's just so much there. Any team that you can get better than 10-1 to be in the championship game isn't a bad bet in itself. So that's my opinion on this conference right now. Tony, great job. Thank you so much for covering everything here. Where can our listeners get your great information and plays?
Well, just follow me on Twitter at TGeorgeSports. Also, Doc Sports. We've been around 53 years now. DocSports.com. And of course, I do daily videos on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, type in Doc Sports, and I've got daily free pick videos there you can access. I tell it like it is. I don't pull any punches. And Doc Sports, like I said, is a good home for me. I've been there for the past 6 years and been in the business. This is my 32nd year in the sports handicapping business. So I've been able to keep my nose clean and stay away from the hype artists and the boiler room operators and all that for all those years. And so we're plugging along. And like you, I've worked very hard in the off season. I'm ready to go, baby.
All right. Tony is ready to go. Make sure you check him out. Doc Sports is a great outfit. Check them out with Mr. Tony George. Thanks again, Tony. We'll be talking soon.
Well, I'll see you in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks, buddy.
See you in 2 weeks.